New York City, a city known as the fashion capital of the world, became a national hotspot due to the city's elaborate parties, bright lights, and luxurious residents. Unfortunately, during the 19th century, this magnificent city had a long way to go before it reached its goal of being the successful and powerful city that it is today. The year was 1853, and during this time period, New York was seen to be unsanitary and overcrowded, in addition to having many impoverished citizens, along with children, turn into criminals. But one man's passion and desire to help the underprivileged led to monumental change in history that we now refer to as the Orphan Train movement. Charles Loring Brace was born in 1826 in the prosperous village of Litchfield, located in Connecticut. This is an area of fruitful Christian professors, preachers, and other accomplished people that had Brace set up to be the next in line to gain success. Raised by hard-working, well-educated Christian people, he wished for others the same fortunate upbringing he was given. His attendance at Yale College is where he pursued theological studies at the Divinity School and New York's Union Theological Seminary. Due to his being raised by disciples of theology, for the majority of his life he was taught to have good morals in addition to a just way of preaching the word to people. Although he was more interested in social service than he was in pulpit preaching. This interest took Charles on a trip to New York, having the intentions of completing seminary training, but this trip took a course of its own. Charles was able to see firsthand the struggles of these misguided children commonly referred to as street Arabs. He began thinking of what he could do to help these children find opportunities for a better life elsewhere. Charles Loring Brace's concern for the rights of orphans and his responsibility in creating programs for orphans eventually led directly to the adoption laws, foster care, and child welfare reform.
All the children line up on a broken plywood stage. Their faces have been washed and their clothes are clean and straight. A farmer fingers Emma's teeth just like he would a mule. But Emma kicks him screaming, "I'm not going home with you."
The majority of Charles' life was lived during the era of good feelings. During this time, there is a rapid increase in population and also in the immigration of various groups of immigrants. America, known to many as the land of hopes and promises, can now be referred to as the rapidly growing cities of drunks, criminals, and non-religious people, all of which were steadily increasing. As a result of large immigrant populations and movement to America, between the years of 1841 and 1860, America welcomed over 4.3 million new citizens. This created urban ethnic ghettos and resulted in several social and economic problems. One of these problems being having created unhealthy living conditions, overcrowding in rooms, and diseases from living in unsanitary quarters. The large population of orphan foreigners fled from unhealthy mental, physical, and emotional living conditions to live on the streets of New York. Majority of the immigrants came to America for jobs. While the men were at work, it was hard for women and children to live on their own. Impoverished, overcrowded, unsanitary boroughs plagued New York City during this time. Many kids and infants sold matches, rags, or newspapers to survive and to gain enough money to eat at the end of the night. Many of these children turned to the idea of forming gangs. This was done to stay safe and protected, and did so by banding together and looking out for one another. Some kids as young as 5 were locked up in adult prisons for stealing things like food simply so that they could eat. Unfortunately, there is no successful organization out there that will help these children. Brace saw a problem and sought out a way to fix it. He believed that he could help these children and shared his thoughts on how he planned to do it in a book he wrote, which subsequently consisted of a series of letters he wrote during this time. A quote that directly came from his work was, "The world's charity is Christ." He intended to solve this problem by giving them a place to stay and to help them become promising people in the future, such as merchants, farmers, mechanics, or wives of those jobs. This could be done by teaching the children traits and having them perfect these traits in an area that gave them the opportunity to do so. His establishment of the Children's Aid Society in 1853 had a main goal, which was to remove children from the streets of New York and give them opportunities out in the Midwest that they never would have received while in New York. The Midwest was a great place to send these children due to the fact that they would learn many traits and would have the ability to work for money in addition to having a home-like environment that they so desperately needed while in New York. Charles first started off by establishing his philosophy, which was nurture over nature. He also wanted to save children from parents and settings that were not ideal. Again, Charles reverted back to his goal of giving these children a life like he had growing up. Before orphan trains came along, there were orphanages and children asylums that were fairly prominent because they were the only social services available during this time for poor and homeless children. This is what motivated the creation of the Children's Aid Society and the relocation of these children, which is better known as the Orphan Train movement.
Small cardboard suitcase.
1854 until 1929, an estimated 200,000 children were shipped out of New York City, Chicago, and Boston to find new homes in the West. This went on for 75 years, started before the Civil War, and only 6 months during the crisis or the height of the Civil War did it stop. The rest of the time, trains carried children west and placed them in homes. The movement was necessitated because of the influx of so many immigrants and not enough jobs, poor sanitation, poor housing, and just absolutely poverty and hard times, the flu, various diseases, consumption.
Charles, along with a group of 9 men that helped him start the Children's Aid Society, raised substantial funds from the public along with many wealthy families such as the Roosevelt, Astor, and Dodge families. Immediately after this money was raised, he began opening lodging houses for homeless youth, as well as industrial schools to teach the children cobbling, sewing, and many other traits that they would soon find beneficial. Once these lodging houses were built, this is a place for orphans to stay to get off the streets until they were relocated to different parts of the U.S. The first train left the Children's Aid Society on September 20th, 1854, and had 46 boys and girls from the ages of 10 to 12 years old. The train was headed to Dowagig, Michigan, where all 46 of the children were successfully placed into new homes. This was just the first of many trains sent out over an 80-year span, and over 150,000 abandoned, abused, and orphaned children were rescued from the slums of New York City.
A town merchant takes him in, sits him on his knee and says, "From now on you're my kin." The orphan trains roll west through the rain.
Fortunately, the majority of the children relocated by the orphan trains ended up having great lives with their new families. Many grew up to do great things, such as John Brady, who became the governor of Alaska, and Andrew Burke, who became the governor of North Dakota. Coincidentally, they rode the same orphan train, bound to Indiana in 1859. The orphan train movement, this great turn of events, was not one man's given orders to pursue, but rather one man's belief in the rights for others and his responsibility to help those citizens gain what they so badly deserved. Charles Lloyd Brace was not only a compassionate man, with a vision to help those in need. He was a man that simply wouldn't stop until the vision he had in mind came to pass. And I believe without Charles' concerns for the rights of orphans and his responsibility in creating programs for them, America, and certainly New York, would not be the great nation and city that they are today.